Hey everyone, it's Rokers here, welcoming you to the world of bunnhop. If you've ever been into MMORPGs or massively multiplayer online role-playing games, especially in the 2000s, you must have heard of Ragnarok Online. Developed and published by Gravity from South Korea, it has been a worldwide phenomenon since its release in its origin country in 2002 and in North America in 2003 through the international server IRO. Soon after, other official servers in the EU, Brazil, Japan, and in many Southeast Asian countries such as Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand opened their doors to millions of adventurers, with most of its hardcore fans still hailing from North America, Latin America, and Southeast Asia to this day. Having been stuck in this timeless retro realm called bunnhop since 1945, except for some random moments when portals open back to the real world, but I always return here after a while. Don't ask why, maybe because I like being immortal and ageless? Anyway, going back, in bunnhop, life was humdrum and dull since I couldn't find any other living creature here, until I found a device that allowed me to experience and explore different worlds and dimensions. I think you peeps call it a computer? Ragnarok Online, more commonly called RO, was one of them. In fact, it was one of the first. I was immediately hooked, especially since it was my only way to reconnect with the real world back then. The portals only started appearing much later. The different playable job classes with their own costumes and skills. The unique background music or BGMs. Oh, the music. Group activities such as party leveling at Glass Time, War of Imperium, and Guild Dungeons. The seasonal quests. There are so many things to love about RO that still resonate to current players and longtime fans, and those who may have left but still get nostalgic every time they hear the theme of Pantera among its many hits. One thing that I enjoy about RO that many players don't seem to know much about is its lore. This isn't surprising since Ragnarok Online's main focus, especially during its infancy, is its gameplay. Grinding for experience for level progression in order to advance to the next job class, collecting gears and upgrading them, collecting cards for your gears, and besting your opponents in player versus player mode or PvP, just to name a few. Unlike other South Korean MMOs that came after, where NPCs speak to you at the tutorial area, give you a bunch of quests, then when you're at a certain level, send you to another map to meet NPCs that will give you even more quests that will both help you level up and learn about the in-game lore, and the cycle continues, there is no hand-holding of this kind in RO. The story quests implemented in its early years, as well as most of its recent quests, are not mandatory, making them easy to miss. The only way to pick up a quest back then was to speak with random NPCs and see if one of them needs your help. All sorts of dangerous secrets hide in the most basic of requests. It wasn't until episode 16.1, The Royal Banquet, released in 2015 in KRO, the official South Korean RO server, and in 2017 in IRO, the official international server, when this and the other newly implemented story quests started to follow a more linear design, and the overarching plot of the game became more apparent. In recent years, these episodic quests are even required to be completed if you'd like to gain access to some of the hunting maps recommended for higher level players, resulting in greater knowledge of these quests and the lore elements presented in them among the player base. In order to understand the overarching story of Ragnarok Online, we have to go back to the game's roots. It's common knowledge that Ragnarok Online was partly inspired by a 10-volume manhwa, the Korean word for comic or graphic novel, entitled Ragnarok by South Korean author and artist Lee Myung-jin, which ran from 1998 to 2001. Many of the game's world elements, including the towns and cities we know and love, Pantera, Payon or Phaeon in the manhwa, Gethen, Morok, Alberta, and even the Schwarzwald Republic, and some of its fundamental story elements, such as its setting, the mortal realm of Midgard, particularly the kingdom of ruined Midgards, with Ragnarok, the end of the world, looming over it, were taken from the manhwa. The comic follows a group of heroes, many of whom are reincarnations of Norse gods, in their goal of stopping the gods, in particular the goddess Freya, from delaying Ragnarok, the event that results in the world being destroyed, effectively ending the Age of Gods, and the subsequent renewal of the world, which ushers in the Age of Man, when gods no longer rule over them. Another significant story element taken from the manhwa is the Heart of Ymir, fragments of which are scattered all around Midgard and are believed to have been parts of the real heart of the giant Ymir, broken into pieces when the god Odin killed him. These fragments were used to quote-unquote create Midgard and quote-unquote power it, with the latter hinting at the fragments being the source of magic in Midgard. These artifacts are something we'll frequently go back to in our exploration of the game's lore. Two more foundational story elements adopted from the manhwa include the presence of the Assassin's Guild, a secret organization in charge of keeping the balance between good and evil in Midgard, and the resurrection of the demon lord Surt, better known in the game as Satan Morok. Despite being inspired by the manhwa, its protagonist, the red-haired Rune Knight Chaos, and other major characters like Fenris Fenrir, Iris Irene, and Sarah Irene only made their appearances in the game from 2012 onwards, 2014 in the case of IRO, through instance quests called Hero's Trail, with the first one entitled Face Worm Nest featuring Chaos and Iris. Hero's Trail 2 has 3 instances, including the Geffen Magic Tournament that occurs in the last volume of the manhwa, allowing us to face Fenrir herself in battle. The last Hero's Trail has 2 instances, both of which follow the duo Chaos and Fenrir's adventures. But did you know that 3 other characters from the graphic novel, Surt, Loki, and Nidhogger, preceded them? Surt in Ragnarok Online was, if I'm not mistaken, the first character from the source material to have been introduced, as early as the game's release, albeit indirectly, since the desert city of Morog got its name from this demon lord hailing from the fiery realm of Muspelheim. He was then officially added into RO's story through the Dandelion's Request quest sometime in 2005, 2006 in the case of IRO, through episode 10.3, Noghalt, the ending of which involves his summoning back into Midgard. This episode was monumental, as we'll explain later. Loki, on the other hand, was introduced into the game around 2013 for IRO, when episode 14.2 Eclage was released, in the quest called Wandering Guardian alongside the dragon Nidhogger. Isn't she adorable? You may be asking, why were Surt, Loki, and Nidhogger added into the game earlier than Chaos and Fenris Fenrir? Well, for Surt, I can only guess that it could have been because RO needed a main villain. Although why it took him 10.3 episodes to appear and only 4.3 episodes after that to be defeated is beyond me. As for Loki, it could have been because of his role in the manhwa as one of the major players in the Assassin's Guild. Preventing the summoning of Satan Morok became the guild's priority at that time, and when they failed, their next goal was to hunt down Satan Morok. It just made sense that he made his entrance after episode 10. As for Nidhogger, since her story is tied to the Yggdrasil tree, it's safe to assume that it's because the Yggdrasil significance in the lore only became evident in the episodes following Surt, aka Satan Morok's escape into the New World, which then resulted in the dimensional gap, a quote-unquote opening into the vacuum of time and space that separates dimensions, giving adventurers access to 3 realms. The first one is Jotunheim, the land of the ice giants Jotnar, with Safa being one of their tribes in the game through Eldikastis. This is followed by Alfheim, the land of the elves, but in RO they're called fairies for some reason, Lufine being one of their tribes through Eclage. Finally, we have Muspelheim, the land of the fire giants, through the many areas introduced in episode 14.3, Battle for Midgard. The Yggdrasil tree is, after all, the source of all life, and keeping it in a healthy state is paramount to the continued survival of all life forms in all these realms, including the humans and Dorams of Midgard. Why the protagonist Chaos and the other heroes were introduced much later than the first three characters is not something I have an explanation for, sadly, so maybe let's chalk it up to artistic freedom. Now, it's time to turn our attention to the game contents to attempt to find RO's overarching plot. In the early years of Ragnarok Online, there wasn't much of a strong established plot direction. Most of the lore was self-contained into maps. In its first episode after the game's release, the 6 major towns and cities of the Rune Midgard's kingdom were the focus, and NPC dialogues as well as many of the standalone quests located in each of these towns and cities served as foundational world building. Since the first few episodes of RO provided the basic building blocks of its world, it wasn't apparent, just yet, where the story was heading. A quick lore point here. Although in some dialogues NPCs refer to Rune Midgard with a D, we could blame localization for this. Remember that Rune Midgards, sometimes called Rune in spin-off games like Ragnarok Origin, is the kingdom, while Midgard is the name used for both the mortal realm and the continent. Through interacting with NPCs, players could gain basic knowledge of Rune Midgard's geography, society, politics, and religion. We got to learn that Rune Midgard is a monarchy, the absolute type if I'm not mistaken, and its political leader was, at that time, King Tristan III of the Gaibolg, later changed to Geoberg, royal family. Remember when the king himself could officiate your wedding with another player? That felt really special. We also got to learn that the kingdom's predominant religion is Odinism, or rather, the Church of Odin. The strange thing that can only be explained as artistic choice is that in Ragnarok Online, Odinism is heavily based on Christianity, with its organizational hierarchy of acolytes, priests, high priests, archbishops, and cardinals. You get the gist. We also learned that each of the 6 towns and cities specialize in a job class. As the kingdom's capital, Printera is also the center of trade, society, and religion, with the grand yet serene Printera Cathedral, where acolytes reside, serving as a testament to the latter. Islud, Printera's satellite town, protects it from invaders coming from the sea, and we can surmise that this is the reason why Islud specializes in training swordsmen. Remember when the Swordsman Guild was still in southeastern Printera? I guess they wanted Islud to have its own specialization, so they decided to move it there eventually. Morok, the desert city, troubled with frequent sandstorms, is the perfect place for the infamous and sneaky Assassin's Guild. The Magic Academy, where mages are trained, is found in Geffen, making it the city of magic. Archers hail from the mountainous region of Paeon, inspired by medieval South Korea. And finally, the port city of Alberta, bustling with overseas trade, is home to merchants and their guild. Each of the 6 first job classes have their respective second job advancement classes: swordsman to knight, acolyte to priest, thief to assassin, magician or mage to wizard, archer to hunter, and merchant to blacksmith. Originally, the Hunters Guild was somewhere near Paeon but was eventually moved to Hugel, and the Blacksmiths Guild was in Geffen but was later moved to Einbrock. Episode 2 introduced Luti, the perpetual Christmas town where Santa himself lives, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is still part of the Rune Midgard's kingdom. The third episode sent adventurers to the Night City of Komodo. Think of a tropical Las Vegas, but situated inside a cavern. Episode 4 was when the Guild vs. Guild mode of War of Imperium was added, while Episode 5 Juno gave us the 2-2 jobs, namely Crusader, Monk, Rogue, Sage, Bard and Dancer, and Alchemist. In 2003, Ragnarok Online embarked on what's referred to as the Global Project, adding in new islands, located approximately in the ocean east of the Midgard continent. As I said earlier, Midgard is the name of both the mortal realm and the main continent where the events of RO are set. These islands are heavily inspired by real-life countries: Amatsu by feudal Japan, Muscovia by Russia, Brasilis by Brazil, Port Malaya by the Philippines, and Ayutthaya by Thailand, just to name a few. Again, the standalone quests on each of these islands are meant to introduce players into the social, cultural, and religious aspects of each of these places from the perspective of a foreign adventurer hailing from the Midgard continent. They also give glimpses to the day-to-day life of the locals, calling these islands their home. I mean, if you haven't tried making your own tom yum goong in Ayutthaya, are you even a real RO fan? Just kidding, of course. Episodes 7 and 8 introduced Umbala, a tribal village situated close to the roots of the Yggdrasil tree, and Niflheim, the land of the dead, respectively. Come to think of it, this means Niflheim was the first realm outside of Midgard that we all got to explore, especially those of us who had to divorce our RO spouses a couple of times. Episode 9 was indeed significant. It added in the rebirth system, allowing for more level progression and making our adventures even stronger. And finally, we reach episode 10, when implementing new gameplay features seem to have stopped being the main priority, making it possible for Gravity to start focusing on developing the overarching plot of Ragnarok Online. Although it was episode 5 Juno that introduced us to another nation, the Schwarzwald Republic, with the titular floating city being its capital, it was episode 10 and its 4 sub-episodes that opened the doors to exploring more of the Republic, allowing us to learn more about this other political player in the Midgard continent. Through the addition of the industrial town of Einbrock in episode 10.1, followed by Latalzen, the corporate city in 10.2, and the quaint town of Hugel in 10.4, adventurers gained access not only to newer and better gears, but to more lore points gleaned from NPC dialogues and, more importantly, from one of the first sets of interconnected quests called Arc Quests in Ragnarok Online. From its name, one can successfully guess that the Republic is a presidential democracy led by a president. Well, it's not as straightforward as that. Although President Karl Theodor Weierstrass is indeed the country's political leader, the shady Ragnarök Corporation also has an undeniable and very palpable influence. Interactions with citizens of the Republic suggest that Schwarzwald is a science-oriented nation, a direct opposite of Rune Midgard's, which prides itself in its powerful magic practitioners. The Ragnarök Corporation, in particular its Regenschirm laboratory, quickly rose to power in the nation, thanks to its many scientists and researchers, most prominent among them is the great sage Varmint, whose successful experiments with the Emir's heart fragment replicas paved the way for technological marvels such as the airships that circle the continent, one of the most effective ways to travel aside from Khafra Inc.'s teleportation services, and the guardians that guard your guild's castle during War of Imperium, among many others. If you're familiar with the Biolaboratory Dungeon, more commonly known as Biolabs, then you'll understand why episode 10 onwards is the starting point for the overarching plot of the game. By the way, did you know that the word Regenschirm is German for umbrella? I don't think it's a coincidence either. You might be wondering why we skipped mentioning 10.3 Noghalt in that lineup for sub-episodes. Well, we saved the best for last. Noghalt refers to the semi-arid lands northeast of Juno toward Hugel, where Thanatos Tower and the Abyss Lake are located. Two, at that time, high-level dungeons within the borders of the Republic. This episode also adds in the expanded job class Tech 1 Kid, which can advance to either Tech 1 Master or Soul Linker. More importantly, a couple of significant lore-heavy standalone and arc quests, including Curse of Gaibog, Thanatos Tower Quest, Shadow Quest aka Reckenberg Job Quest, Heart Fragment Quest, and Dandelion's Request, were implemented in 10.3 Noghalt. So, you see, it's really from episode 10 when the story finally starts to become really interesting, setting up events that will eventually lead to a more standardized, linear plot direction, as we mentioned beginning episode 16. Episode 11 is another banger. Centered on the religious Arunafelt states, its 3 sub-episodes presented new maps, including its capital city and center of religion, Rachel, in 11.1, the canyon village of Vanes in 11.2, and the nameless island and its cursed abbey in 11.3. From a first glance, we can see that Arunafelt is a nation unlike any other. It bears a stark contrast to the more secular Republic of Schwarzwald and the Odinist magic practitioners of the Kingdom of Rune Midgards. In the streets of Rachel, originally called Darael and KRO, the goddess Freya is worshipped, most especially in its sacred ground, the Rachel Sanctuary. One can easily imagine just how hostile many of the more radical followers of Freya could be in the presence of Odin-worshipping adventurers from Rune Midgards. But the ire of Rachel and Vanes' citizens is not our main concern. What's more curious are 3 specific places: the freezing cold cave of the Ice Dungeon northeast of Rachel, the blazing hot Thor's volcano southwest of the capital, and the mysterious so-called Nameless Island located off of the southern shores of Vanes. The most intrepid adventurers can find tales of danger, secrecy, and an impending war in these lesser-traveled areas. And what exactly happened to King Tristan III? Rune Midgards is left leaderless when the king disappears, leaving his court scrambling. Our wise father Banff, whom you'll be very familiar with if you watched our Ragnarok Origin lore series, and if you've done the Curse of Gaivold quest yourself, sends us on a hunt for the monarch. One that takes us to Komodo, Rachel, and finally the cursed abbey on the Nameless Island. Don't forget to check out the plants while you're there. You'll see a familiar poisonous one. Then it all comes crashing down in episode 12. Satan Morok is resurrected and flees through the ash vacuum, aka the dimensional gap, allowing us to venture into 3 new realms based on Norse mythology as previously mentioned. The New World arc encompasses 2 episodes with multiple sub-episodes each. In episode 13, we meet the Lafine fairies and the Safa ice giants and try to broker peace between these 2 warring tribes. It was also in episode 13 when 3rd job classes were released, allowing for further skill and stat advancement. Episode 14 takes us to Eclage, the home of the Lafine fairies. But before we get there, we'd have to go through the incredibly annoying hazy forest, and if we manage to find the exit, we'll arrive at Mora village, where heroes who have successfully gone through the maze stay to rest and wait for their comrades. Eclage is just a jump and a hop from that village. Episode 14.3 is where the New World arc draws to a close, with a journey to parts of Muspelheim in search for Satan Morok. Returning to Midgard after the triumphant defeat of Surt, we are stopped by the Eden Group's ever-so-charming secretary Lime Evanor, suggesting we help his, the leader of the Eden Group, Commander Archean Nile Adnad, aka Nile, in the combined excavation efforts between the Eden Group and Reckenberg into the ruins beneath Juperos. There they found Varus City. This side quest line reveals the truth about the rise and fall of a surprisingly more advanced culture that predated ours. Essentially, episode 15, Phantasmagorica, is a deep dive into Juno's past, considering the people of Varus City were the ancestors of Juno's current citizens. Finally, Linearity begins from episode 16, with episodes 16, 17, and 18 honing in on the political-religious conflicts between the 3 nations, the Rune Midgards Kingdom, the Republic of Schwarzwald, and the Arunafelt states, which, and finally we've come to this point, is the overarching story and the main plot direction of the game Ragnarok Online. TLDR, or rather TLDW, Rune Midgards worships Odin, Arunafelt's worships Freya. Both countries value the Ymir's heart fragment replicas for various purposes, but Schwarzwald Republic, especially the Regenschirm laboratory, values it the most, especially since it was one of the researchers that created these replicas, and they're willing to do everything together, all of them, for, as you can guess, nefarious reasons. Freya and her followers from Arunafelds work to bring about the coming of Ragnarok because fear will help her amass more worshippers, making her more powerful than Odin, but also she wants the world to end, presumably because she wants to rule over the new world when it's made anew. There we have it, peeps. Isn't it swell? The overarching plot of Ragnarok Online might sound simple to you, but as they say, don't judge the book by its cover, or in this case, don't judge the game by its overarching plot, since the true treasure is, aside from the friends we meet along the way, and I definitely met more than a handful of friends through RO, but really, the real treasure is the journey, right? The characters we meet and the relationships we build with them, the places we explore, the mysteries we unveil. The journey. The journey to the eventual and unstoppable end of the world! Yeah, sorry about the spoiler. I thought you already knew. I mean, why else would there be Ragnarok 2 if not for Freya succeeding in destroying the damn world? But, in all honesty, the Ragnarok Online story is still going on and still going strong, and KRO is currently at episode 19, Isgard, Land of Snowflowers. As long as Jormungandr is still asleep, and maybe even after that, our adventure will continue. And I truly hope it continues for many more years to come. So, how was it? Have you always known about the story of Ragnarok Online? Did you wish it was more linear from the start? And be honest, just how many characters have you made in the game? Let me know in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. Stay tuned for more in-depth Ragnarok Online lore explorations here at bunnhop. Until next time, bye!